So currently 94% of the city permits residential. We are proposing 98%, and so Planning Commission wants it to be 100%. With that 98% though, we have upzoned quite a bit, so we have projected that it would be between 30 to 97,000 units over potentially. That's what would be enabled, not guaranteed what would come. And to put into perspective, 97,000 would be more than what New York City is currently trying to enable.
That was Ann Arbor City Planner Michelle Bennett on February 10th, 2025, explaining proposed updates to the city's comprehensive land use plan. This is Few Things Considered from A2 Council Update. This week, Ann Arbor City Council met for a work session that included a staff presentation about a new comprehensive plan for the city. In 2024, the city began a process of public engagement to share ideas with residents and get feedback about an updated comprehensive land use plan. A recent video released by the city explains more.
Let's start with defining what the comprehensive land use plan is. It's a policy document required by state law to shape how the city will be developed in the coming decades. The plan guides city staff, the Planning Commission, and City Council on a variety of topics, including where should we grow, how should we grow, and how can we balance numerous goals and priorities.
In the last year, city staff have collaborated with consultants, leading public meetings for residents to learn and offer perspective about the comprehensive plan. These public meetings projected a message of inclusivity, while city staff and consultants wore T-shirts emblazoned with the name of the Mayor's Political Action Committee, or PAC, Ann Arbor for Everyone. Since its creation in October 2023, most of the money in the Mayor's PAC has been collected in large sums from out-of-state, local developers and property investors, and from wealthy residents who no longer have to work, one due to inherited money, and one due to the buyout of a local tech company, Duosec. Funds donated to the mayor's PAC support his own political campaigns and those of council allies. Last year, the mayor's PAC opposed local campaign finance and election reform. This week, city staff explained that the process of public engagement has concluded, and the comprehensive plan will soon be drafted at the City Planning Commission.
We're shifting from engagement to actually producing the document. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission drafts the plan, they approve it, and then they deliver it to you for approval or rejection. And then only at that point does it form the basis for our land use policy going forward. As a reminder, once that comprehensive plan is drafted, nothing changes. It's our to-work list, it's our goal, it's our to-do list, and then we have to get to work implementing that plan. So that's really important to keep in mind as well.
State law directs this sequence. The City Planning Commission prepares the plan and recommends it for City Council to approve. According to state law, the Planning Commission is meant to be representative of different segments of the community, its various interests and concerns. Members of the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission are chosen and appointed by the mayor, then approved by City Council. Council member Lisa Dish serves as a liaison to the Planning Commission and voting member. The current chair of the Planning Commission was appointed in 2020. At that time, he managed real estate assets for one of the city's largest landowners, Oxford Companies, whose CEO is one of the city's largest political donors. Oxford Companies' CEO and his wife have donated $22,000 to the mayor and current members of City Council, plus $5,000 last year in opposition to local campaign finance reform. Since December 2024, the chair of the Planning Commission no longer manages real estate for Oxford Companies. He now manages real estate for the venture capital endeavors of Song United, directed by Duosec founder Doug Song and his wife, former councilmember Lynn Song. Since 2018, Doug and Lynn Song have donated over $90,000 to the mayor and candidates for city council, as well as other city campaigns endorsed by the mayor. Lynn Song donated over $23,000 to herself to win her own seat on city council. Last year, Lynn Song gave $35,000 to help defeat local campaign finance and election reform. 5 other planning commissioners do specialized work or have property interests in land development. 4 commissioners are urban planners. 1 is an architect. Another works at the U of M. Her partner serves on the city's Renters Commission. 3 commissioners are landlords with rental property in Ann Arbor. 6 planning commissioners, including council liaison Lisa Dish, are University of Michigan staff or faculty. An 8th commissioner is a software engineer and pastor. In 2020, he allowed his image to be used in campaign materials promoting one of the mayor's endorsed candidates for city council. Once elected, she admitted that other aspects of her campaign were dishonest. In June 2021, he advocated for a development that staff had urged council to reject. Staff argued that the development was too large and would not be advantageous to the city. He made this public comment at City Council.
Density also does something that Ann Arbor prides itself on: progressive politics. It moves us in a progressive direction. And I want to end by saying density is fun.
The next month, the mayor nominated him to the Planning Commission. A 9th commissioner is an attorney. Since 2018, he and his wife have donated over $13,000 to the mayor and current council members, plus other city campaigns endorsed by the mayor. This Planning Commission will now begin their work, drafting the comprehensive land use plan for the city of Ann Arbor. Staff presented more details about the plan.
So this is our future land use map where just the proposed low-rise residential is this light yellow color here. So that currently covers exactly the same geography as our R1 and R2 zones, and that's about 36% of the city's land. One of our directives from City Council was to find ways to increase housing supply and densify our R1 and R2. So we went to the community and we showed them images of what it would look like, because densifying means different things to different people. We got quite a bit of positive feedback, a lot of support for about 4 units per parcel. I think about 70% or so of those who attended our sessions supported that level of density. In the last few months, in conversations with the subcommittee, the Planning Commission subcommittee, they raised the question of, do we really need to limit that? If it is so difficult to find housing in Ann Arbor, is there any way that we could increase density even further? So up to triplex and quadplex was the most popular. This does provide more opportunity for larger scale development in the city. However, as we learn more and more through some of the other studies that are being done with sanitary sewer and water, that there may be some utility infrastructure challenges with larger development in these neighborhoods.
They described 3 mixed-use hubs: a secondary downtown core at Eisenhower near Briarwood, an innovation hub on Plymouth Road, and a retail hub on Washtenaw.
As you can see here, this is the Briarwood footprint. This would be thought to be another core, like a downtown in the southern part of the city. I do think in general there is some consensus around that this area is ripe for redevelopment. There is a large footprint here, larger parcels surrounding it, and a lot of parking lot to work with. However, in this part of the city is one of the most infrastructure constrained in terms of utilities, and also this reoccurring question that if we are to start adding residential to these areas that previously don't have them, are we fulfilling our goal here of these 15-minute neighborhoods? Do we have the parks, the transit, all the other infrastructure needed to support that?
In explaining an innovation district at Plymouth Road, staff acknowledged the problems that result from an unregulated housing market.
Originally, this was proposed to have limited residential use. Principally, it would be, again, some of these kind of biotech type uses that U of M is investing in to provide some space for potential spin-offs from U of M's investment. And the reason we propose limited residential is that the market for that is so strong. There is a concern that if we were to allow it unregulated, that is what would be built. It would crowd out any other type of use that could be built there.
At the January meeting of the Planning Commission, one member argued against the community value of mixed use and in favor of an unregulated market for the benefit of property owners.
We're transferring wealth from one set of people to another. We're transferring wealth from the people who own the property who might want to sell it for a higher use. We're inhibiting the useful redevelopment of the zones. We're shrinking the tax base. I don't think we need to add new layers of law on top of those existing contracts and other devices that are functionally doing that work for us if arresting housing development is something we want to pursue. I'm going to stop talking now.
This week, staff described the Planning Commission's desire for immediate change rather than gradual transition.
We're thinking here about Arborland, Maple Village, Westgate. These areas, these retail areas are sort of on the fringe of the city near highway interchanges. So they are very car-centric. They have large parking lots. Like I mentioned, they are no one's desired format. And the goal would be to transition them over time into walkable mixed-use hubs. Planning Commission wanted a more complete sort of overhaul of redevelopment. When we explained to them that in order to transition these areas, it's going to take a long time, and that a lot of these stores or these businesses have signed 20 to 30 to 40-year-long leases. So someone would have to come in, buy all of those leases out, potentially demolish those buildings, potentially upsize their infrastructure before they could even start to redevelop. That this is going to delay the process quite a bit. And so that is something to consider. But they were pretty steadfast in not wanting to relax any of the standards so that we wouldn't kind of incrementally grow in those areas, that there is a hope that it will be taken care of all at once.
Staff explained the value of an employment district at South Industrial and Research Park.
So the idea with preserving that is to help preserve a diversity of jobs, that not every job here is related to the university, that there are jobs here that you do need to be in person that are manual labor, and that there should be places preserved for that in the city. 94% of our land permits residential. Our future land use map would propose 98, but the Planning Commission wants there to be housing permitted in 100% of the city, which would mean on this corridor as well.
Members of the Planning Commission have dismissed the value of this district.
I think we're harking back to a way that people used to work that doesn't happen anymore. So many people now are working out of their homes remotely, until the federal government tells them they can't. I think a lot of people with climate change and what does Ann Arbor have to offer are going to want to move here and can find ways to work in small commercial buildings and out of their homes in ways that we don't need to set aside large no housing commercial districts and say no residential here.
Some planning commissioners have emphasized their lack of interest in any land use other than housing and are frustrated that their preferences have been ignored.
I just want to say more housing, as much housing as possible everywhere. And I agree with Commissioner Hammerschmidt about very skeptical of an innovation zone. And if there is really a need, I don't see it, but if there was a need for an employment zone, it doesn't have to say non-residential. It could also just be some way of encouraging employment there that doesn't prohibit residential.
One commissioner complained that his wish for taller structures in all neighborhoods has been ignored.
We had a robust conversation about the 48-foot height limit, and it got removed. It got removed completely from the consultant's presentation. It got removed from the public presentation at the library. And in your comments tonight, it's still removed because you started with a 35-foot height limit. And so it's confusing to me because if we're consistently giving the same feedback, but every time the feedback is aggregated and represented to us, and it's missing the feedback, that tells me somebody somewhere is getting rid of it.
The chair of the Planning Commission argues that increased height limit would be more convenient for developers.
I'll just explain my train of thought when I had brought that up, which was, to me, to the extent that's feasible, I would like to try to eliminate conflicts with the Michigan Building Code relative to zoning code, so that a developer doesn't have to necessarily look at multiple sources to say, like, oh, this is what I can do under Michigan Building Code, but for some reason has different definitions than zoning.
This week, city staff reported to council that community engagement for the comprehensive plan did not include mention of a 48-foot height limit.
When we started this conversation, we started with a lot of the council direction that it was one of the directions was increasing housing density in all areas of the city, including single-family neighborhoods. We didn't explicitly talk about 4 stories and unlimited. I would say the nuance of that would be in the context of we did hear a lot of feedback for increasing density in areas of the city. I don't know in the spaces of a lot of support for expanding downtown, a lot of support for expanding housing along our corridors, but in short, no, we didn't explicitly bring that typology to single and 2-family neighborhoods that exist currently in the city.
This was also explained to the Planning Commission.
We specifically talked about 35 feet, 4 units with the public for much of this last year as a way of, and again, mea culpa, as a way of trying to illustrate something, but it has conflated a land use policy. But when late in the process at both the steering committee and the planning commission subcommittee, the conversation came up, and it was a quick evolution of that we should raise the height limit to 48 feet, as Commissioner Lee indicated, and there should be no restriction on the number of units.
In answer to questions, staff reiterated points made earlier.
Our presumption is that when residential market pressure is pitted up against maybe innovation space, employment zones, you saw pictures of a thrift store, of a coffee shop, when given those pressures coming to those sites, the residential market pressure probably carries a bigger stick. And so without a regulatory framework that either prohibits or limits the ability of that market stick to impact and potentially displace those uses, if we put some zone on that map that says we think that this is a high potential for densification and growth and a full diversity of uses, but simultaneously, we find out that there are infrastructure needs that are going to be barriers to realizing the development at that geography or that scale. It's going to be really important that we communicate in that plan that we have to answer those questions and facilitate that supply before we flip the switch to allow those land uses to come in place to get implemented.
Council was given clarification on how planning and zoning works.
Is it possible to allow housing now and then potentially limit it later if it does appear that housing is overwhelming?
The short answer is yes. We could make a land use decision that's more inclusive now and then reconsider it at some point in the future. I think I would just share that it's not impossible, but it's harder to go back than it is forward.
Staff emphasized differences between their recommendations and those of the Planning Commission.
So currently, 94% of the city permits residential. We are proposing 98%. So it's just that employment zone, that's 2% of land that would not allow housing, or at least that's what we proposed. And so Planning Commission wants it to be 100%. With that 98%, though, we have upzoned quite a bit, so we have projected that it would be between 30 to 97,000 units over potentially. That's what would be enabled, not guaranteed what would come. And to put into perspective, 97,000 would be more than what New York City is currently trying to enable.
And so, but to be clear, we're following Planning Commission direction at this point. There are infrastructure questions that I think will honestly have to be addressed very clearly in the plan, because we don't want to convey to the public, this is our vision, this is our zone. Oh, sorry, it turns out we have to fix this pipe before we can say yes.
The mayor summed up his perspective.
Of course, thank you all for the work that you've done on this project and those you represent. or embody. Like to thank Planning Commission, who's done a great deal of work on this and has pretty consistently heard this council's and heard the community's voice that that we do have a housing crisis. Similar, along those lines, but although for my part, I am 2 feet in on the housing crisis and the need to address. It is also, one of the challenges that we have in the city.
2 members of council walked out early, before or during public comment. Commenters at the end of the meeting offered different viewpoints. One resident, a former council member allied with the mayor, argued in favor of deregulation and displacement, allowing the free market to dictate land use.
On the surface, the employment zone is appealing from the standpoint of preserving some businesses that a lot of us know and love, but these come and go on their own. And in my opinion, it's preferable not to try to freeze them where they are and exclude housing, but rather to allow housing to grow among those businesses. And if the housing pressure is so great that some of those businesses are eventually displaced, this means that housing is desperately needed and should be allowed. If there's a fear of residential overwhelming available property, again, that's because there's a severe shortage and it should be allowed to be built.
Other residents reminded council about the role of government in directly addressing the needs of the community and the environment.
Hopefully, the comprehensive plan, we can find ways to encourage a mix of housing types, not to have monolithic types of development by essentially just deregulating and letting the market give us whatever the market wants to give us. As we develop the comprehensive plan, I want to make sure that we accommodate things that directly meet our goals, as opposed to just deregulating and hope for indirect measures to meet our goals.
I would like to encourage the staff and Planning Commission, as they move forward, to explicitly include elements of natural features in the comprehensive plan that acknowledge the importance of trees and vegetation to support carbon sequestration, heat island effects, filtering of water and air, and habitat for animals of all types, as well as the natural health benefit of exposure to natural features for humans.
The work session ended after 2 hours and 40 minutes. Future consideration and recommendations for the comprehensive plan will happen at the City Planning Commission, which meets twice a month on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. If you'd like to see more content like this, like and subscribe.